Omnivore's Dilemma, Chapter 5, pages 59 through 64. The Feedlot, Turning Corn into Meat. I was speeding down a ramrod straight road in Finney County, Kansas, when the empty, dull, tan prairie suddenly turned black. The gently rolling sea of grass became a grid of steel fences as far as the eye could see. In Kansas, that is really far. I had made it to my destination, Pokey Feeders, a feedlot and home to 37,000 head of cattle. The feedlot appeared suddenly, but the stench of the place had been rising for more than a mile. I soon learned why. At first I thought the cattle were standing or lying in a grayish mud. Then it dawned on me. That wasn't mud at all. It was manure. An endless series of cattle pens stretched into the horizon, each one home to 100 or so animals. The cattle pens filled with animals and their waste were built around a corn mill. 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, the mill noisily turns America's river of corn into cattle feed. I'd traveled to Pokey early one January with a crazy idea of visiting a particular resident. I was looking for a young black steer with 3 white blazes on his face, the same one I'd met the previous fall on a ranch in South Dakota, 500 miles due north of here. In fact, the steer belonged to me. I'd purchased him as an 8-month-old calf from the Blair Ranch for $598. I was paying Pokey Feeders $1.60 a day for his room and board, all the corn he could eat. My idea was to follow my steer as he traveled through the meat-making branch of the industrial food chain, and so I had followed him here. The old-fashioned way of raising cattle, like the old-fashioned way of growing corn, was on a small family farm. Cattle were raised in pastures, eating grass and hay and food they naturally eat. But as corn took over the family farm, cows and other animals were pushed out. Cattle are now raised in densely packed animal cities like Pokies. These places are called CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations. Farmers gave up raising cattle because, as strange as it may seem, it costs a farmer more to grow feed corn than it cost a CAFO to buy it, thanks to those government subsidies. Eating meat used to be a special occasion in most American homes. Thanks to CAFOs, meat is now so cheap that many of us eat it 3 times a day. Of course, the American taxpayers have already paid a part of the cost by subsidizing corn. But there are other costs involved in raising cattle this way, costs that shoppers don't see when they buy the steak at the supermarket. On old-fashioned farms, there's really no such thing as waste. Animal manure goes back to the fields as fertilizer, but the waste from the CAFOs is a huge source of very toxic pollutions. Tons of animal manure are produced with no good way of disposing of it. The feedlots are also breeding grounds for new and deadly bacteria. Some of these bacteria are finding their way into our food. And there's another cost raising cattle on CAFOs, one that's even harder to see. These animals have evolved to eat grass, but in a CAFO they are forced to eat corn at considerable cost to their health, to the health of the land, and ultimately the health of us, their eaters. I first met steer number 534 on the Blair Ranch, 5,500 acres of rolling short-grass prairie a few miles outside Sturgis, South Dakota. In a part of the prairie you can still make out ruts and dugs and stagecoaches and cattle drivers of the 1800s. In November, when I visited, the ground was covered with a thick coat of yellow and gold grass. Sprinkled across the fields were moving black dots, Angus cows' calves grazing. Ed and Rich Blair runs what's called a cow-calf operation. Their business is the first stage in the production of a hamburger. It is also the stage least changed by the modern industrial food chain. Beef cattle still get born on thousands of independently owned ranches like theirs. Steer number 534 spent his first 6 months in these pastures alongside his mother, a cow named 9534. The number means that she was 34th cow born in 1995. His mother never met his father, an Angus by the name of Gare Precision. 1680. Like all beef cattle, 534 is the product of artificial insemination. Born on March 13, 2001, in the birthing shed across the road, 534 and his mother were turned out to pasture just as soon as the 80-pound calf could stand up. Within a few weeks, the calf began adding to his diet of mother's milk. He chose from a salad bar of grasses, western wheatgrass, little blue stem buffalo grass, green needlegrass. Apart from the Saturday in April when he was branded and castrated, one could imagine 534 looking back on those 6 months as the good old days. No one can really know what a cow feels, but we can say with confidence that a calf grazing on grass is doing what he is supremely well suited to do. Yet after a few months at Pokey, my steer will never have the opportunity to eat grass again. Cows have evolved over millions of years to eat grass. It's not a one-sided deal. At the same time, grasses have evolved over millions of years to be eaten by cows. This partnership is one of nature's wonders. When a cow eats grass, it doesn't kill the plant. Grasses have evolved so that they can survive being eaten very well, as long as the cow gives them a chance to recover. In return for being chewed on, the plants get help from the cows. The cow protects the grass's habitat by eating young trees and shrubs that might compete with grasses. The animal also spreads grass seed, plants it with his hooves, and then fertilizes it with his manure. Only certain animals, including cows, sheep, goats, and bison, can make a meal out of grass. They can do this because they have a specialized second stomach called the rumen. That's why these animals are called ruminants. The rumen is like a 25-gallon fermentation tank. Here is where the cow gets some help. Inside that tank lives a type of bacteria that dines on grass. The bacteria break down the cell walls of the grass and allow the cows to get all that protein and carbohydrates within.